So first step is do not choose an R35. So I would choose an S15. I like the S chassis. I think it's a good fit.
Welcome to the HPA Tuned In podcast. I'm Andre, your host, and in this episode, we're chatting with Cole Powelson from Life Motorsport, as well as Sierra Cars. Now, Cole is a long-term friend of High Performance Academy, and we've had the chance to bump into him and chat on camera numerous times, including at World Time Attack, as well as at Pikes Peak. These days, we're forced to connect with Cole in slightly different ways, thanks to the lack of travel with COVID at the moment, but we're making the most of that situation. Now, Cole is no stranger to motorsport. As I mentioned, he founded and runs Life Motorsport, which is a business which modifies and builds all manner of modified road cars through to full-blown race cars. On top of that, lately he's moved into a slightly different direction with Sierra Cars, where he's actually designing and building his own take on what makes a really cost-effective race car. Now, this is, if you've ever seen them before, they're often referred to as cross carts, which is a really simple motorcycle engined tube-framed car. One of the advantages with these is the power to weight ratio is insane. They are only a single seater, but while I haven't had the ability to drive one yet, they look like a huge amount of fun. And Cole with Sierra Cars is finding success all around the world with his take on this form of motorsport. Inside of this interview, we chat about a wide range of topics, including how Cole got involved in wrenching on cars, as well as his time behind the driver's steering wheel as well, because at heart he is a racer. And essentially, as we find out, everything he's done through his career has really been trying to get more seat time. One of the aspects that Cole is probably best known for is Life Motorsport's insane R35 GTR, which also made a showing at World Time Attack over in Sydney a few years back, and we actually followed the car at that particular event. However, we also saw Cole race that particular car at Pikes Peak a few years ago when I had the ability to be over there supporting another car. Interestingly, we also find out about what Cole's got planned for this year's 2022 100th running of Pikes Peak. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but it's out there and should be something that will be definitely worth watching. All right, before we get into our interview with Cole today, just for anyone who is new to High Performance Academy, we are an online training school. We specialize in teaching people how to tune EFI, build performance engines, construct quality, reliable wiring harnesses, and we also teach race driving as well as race car setup. And we do this all with video-based training courses that you can take from the comfort of your living room. This means there's no cost involved in traveling to us in order to learn. If you are interested in finding a little bit more out about our courses, you can head to hpacademy.com/courses, and that'll give you a full list of all of the courses we currently offer. Relevant to today's interview, for anyone who's maybe interested in learning a little bit more about the art of race driving, we do have our Race Driving Fundamentals course, which will teach you everything you need to know if you want to get your car out on a racetrack and optimize your lap times. And I can guarantee learning the skills involved in that course are going to drop seconds off your laps, regardless whether you're absolutely fresh to driving on a racetrack or maybe you've been competing for some time. It's probably the cheapest performance you will get. And to make it even cheaper, as a listener to this podcast, you can use the coupon code podcast75. That will get you $75 off the purchase of your very first HPA course. We'll chuck a link in the description that you can use. All right, with our introduction out of the way, let's jump into our interview with Cole. All right, welcome to the podcast, Cole. Thanks for joining us today. Now, just for our audience who maybe aren't aware of Life Motorsport and your other enterprise, Sierra Cars, could you give us a bit of a rundown on your background of how you got involved with racing and building race cars?
Yeah, it's I think I was just attracted to cars as a younger kid. Not super young. I didn't grow up in a car family, but 15 years old, I started driving a manual transmission, and I was playing with bikes before that. So naturally, bikes became cars. And so I went from being a bicycle mechanic, which is about my first job, and I became a car mechanic and started building cars for myself. And that turned into working in pro racing and building cars for other people. So that grew. And in 2014, I started Life Motorsport. And yeah, I've been building race cars for people. And in 2017, I started Sierra Cars, and we had the first couple of prototypes built in 2018. So just been head down working on that stuff ever since, just trying to stay behind the wheel of a race car.
All right, so a lot of stuff that you've just mentioned there that we're going to unpack as we go through this podcast. But let's start with the transition from motorcycles to cars. So you actually became a qualified mechanic and started working on cars, or you're just self-taught?
Self-taught. I was into bikes because you could ride a bike faster than you could run. So naturally the speed felt better. There was a lot of mountain biking in the area in Utah where I grew up. So I started doing BMX racing and mountain bike downhill stuff. And so I was working on bikes. My first job was at the back of the bike shop. I'd unpack the bike out of the box, assemble it, and put it out on the showroom floor. And wasn't into cars or engines or anything in that realm. Just really couldn't afford it. So when I turned 15, I bought a Geo, which is like a little Isuzu hatchback, front wheel drive. Bought it for my grandma, so it was a real sports car. And I like driving a manual transmission. And then from there, I started looking into sports cars, performance cars. And the first brand I was drawn to was Subaru. I love the rally car stuff. So yeah, I just started playing Gran Turismo around 2000. I was like 14 years old. And yeah, I got into Subarus and performance tuning, if you want to call it that. But I just wanted to be a race car driver. The mechanic thing was totally like, oh, you have to have a real job. You have to make money. You just can't be a race car driver. And so I didn't win the birth lottery or anything. So I didn't have a bunch of cash to go out and buy a race car. So I became a mechanic, was a wrench, started building cars for myself, and then started doing it for other people.
Okay, so yeah, obviously got the wrong end of that with motorcycles. So mountain bikes, a lot less moving parts, but that's fine. Same. I mean, some mechanical understanding and capability kind of translates, although obviously a bit more to consider when you're wrenching on cars. Now, I'm interested. Obviously, you've gone down a path that's probably not too dissimilar to a lot of people. It sounds like you've already said the passion there was really racing, and it sounds like you're kind of doing whatever you need to do to get by so you can get out on the racetrack. So how did that skill set get developed of race driving? Because that's another thing. A lot of enthusiasts sort of without a lot of access to a racetrack, it can be difficult to develop those skills. And what we learn when we go through our driver's license and learn how to drive a passenger car on a public road, I mean that's a very different skill set to actually extracting the most performance out of a race car on a closed course racetrack.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And one of my biggest challenges really in life is, how do I get behind the wheel of a race car as a regular broke kid? And I always wanted to go faster and be able to spend more money, and I didn't have it. So being able to build race cars for people with the budget that can afford to build it was my key. That was my way into proper race cars, is I had to use OPM, which is other people's money. And that's absolutely essential for somebody who's up and coming. There's even in F1, you have people buying seats, whether it's somebody that believes in them or their dad's friend's concrete company, whatever it is, it takes money to make these things happen. And so as I was building cars for other people, I was also using my personal money to fund my own racing. So when I was 21, I came out of Porsche factory training. I was the youngest factory trained Porsche technician in the country for sure, North America for sure. But I lived in my parents' basement. So I was making pretty decent money working at the Porsche dealer. And then I used all my paid vacation to work for race teams. And so I traveled all summer long working in the Porsche GT3 Cup Series. So I'm living in my parents' house, working on Porsches. I bought a 911, and I self-taught myself how to drive and tune the car based off of what I was learning every race weekend. So I'd go and learn, how the engineers were setting up a car, how the driver feedback would come through the gentleman driver, and how that driver feedback would come through the pro driver. And, it's very, very different between those two. But I was kind of able to wade through their information, then apply it to my own track car. When I was 22 years old, I bought my first go-kart. So I started racing shifter karts on a local level, and then that moved a couple of years later to a national level. And so, I just self-funded, and it's a late in life thing. I wish I could say I got started in karts as a young kid, but I didn't touch a shifter kart until I was 22, 23 years old. But I just had to do it myself. There was plenty of guys I worked with that wanted to do the same thing, but they weren't taking the initiative to just train themselves how to drive, and so it was just, I had to do it, and that's the only way I knew how.
I think it's fair to say that there is no path that you have to go down, and I could be wrong, but I'm guessing at this point you probably aren't sort of vying for a seat on Red Bull's F1 team in the foreseeable future, which is going to obviously be 99.99% of people in the world, and we do this because we enjoy it and it's a passion. You've mentioned karts there, which is a proven time and time again pathway to the upper echelons of motorsport. Probably wouldn't find too many F1 drivers or IndyCar drivers who haven't started at least at some point in karts. So for those listening, maybe they don't want to get to F1, but they want to become a competent, fast driver in whatever their chosen form of motorsport is. Do you think karts is a cost-effective starting point? Because I'll kind of define why I'm asking that question. Obviously, motor racing, as you've already alluded to, it's expensive. And karts can be seen as a more cost-effective way in. And I don't doubt it is. But of course, like any form of motorsport, if you want to be competitive in karts, there's still a huge cost that goes along with that. So could you talk to us about your experience there? Is it significantly cheaper than, maybe you started out with a 911, so probably in the deep end anyway. But what's your thoughts on that?
It's absolutely just as expensive for me to race club level, like high club level karting was just as expensive as running track day stuff with my Porsche. And you cannot beat the wheel-to-wheel racecraft that you get on the kart track. I learned more about racecraft on the kart track than I ever have in all my wheel-to-wheel sports car experiences. The racing just isn't nearly as close. But I felt like I personally needed both disciplines to develop myself as a driver. In a kart, everything happens wicked fast, very, very fast. The acceleration, braking, steering, all of it happens super fast. Which is great. You have quick reflexes, but it doesn't translate to sports cars. Sports cars, a kart chassis depends on the flex of the chassis. That's your spring rate. That's how the thing handles. And so when you take a good kart driver and put them in a car, the way the chassis behaves and the way they react isn't really natural. So I think it was beneficial for me to get the racecraft of wheel-to-wheel racing on the kart side, and then the race car development side on, setting up my Porsche and building other customer cars for the development side of things. So I felt both were important, but the racecraft that I needed on the kart track is far superior to anything I've needed on any wheel-to-wheel like sports car race. There's just much larger disparities as far as car prep, talent levels, track conditions, tire types. It's just not even close, where you can have 40 karts within 0.3 of each other, and then you look at a car grid and you're like 4 seconds among a 15 car field. So just big differences there.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, getting that wheel-to-wheel understanding, the racecraft, as you've put it, and also just that situational awareness of almost like a sort of an understanding without even being able to see of where other karts are around you. Because of course, when you're in a car, we don't want to be rubbing panels, but you could probably get away with a light touch. But with karts where the open wheels are exposed, often there's not a lot of room for error, and touching wheel to wheel can end up pretty catastrophic. You've just touched on that transition from karting to actual car racing, which is interesting. Obviously, as you mentioned, there's no suspension as such in a kart, and you're relying on tuning the flex of the chassis. That's got to give a very different feel because there's no real compliance in terms of suspension. In a conventional car, we turn into a corner, we've got the load transfers, the suspension compresses, which is obviously going to feel very different in a car to what you get in a kart with that razor sharp transition. So what's the learning curve in sort of transitioning from karting to a normal automotive race car?
So I've always explained it as karting is really physical and cars are really mental. So meaning that if you have, let's say you have a cart and it weighs a few hundred pounds, I don't know what it is in kilos, you can figure that out. But things happen really quick. You turn, it goes. Whereas you have a 3,000, 4,000 pound car, you've got to plan your turn in well in advance. So by the time it starts to move and change direction, a lot of time has passed. So you're driving mental, you're driving ahead of the car, where the cart is so physical and things happen right now. So I'd say where karting is a lot more physical, driving sports cars is a lot more mental. And so the mental approach that you have, especially around setting up a car, let alone racing it, is quite a bit different. And it's less reliant on reaction times and more reliant on feel and experience. That's why you can see guys race sports cars in their 60s and put up very comparable times to some of the younger kids, just because it is less reliant on absolute reaction time and speed.
Sure. One of the things, I don't want to get too deep into karts because obviously it is a fairly niche form of motorsport. We don't really deal with it, but it's just of interest to me. One of the aspects of a kart is that essentially it has no rear differential. It's a beam axle where both of the rear wheels turn at the same speed. Now that can, at least in my experience with cars, can create some interesting handling characteristics, particularly in the wet. The car doesn't really want to turn into the corner and wants to go straight ahead. So what are you doing to kind of get around the inherent handling traits that a locked rear end causes in a kart? Is it a driving style or is it setup?
It's both. It's certainly both. I've been able to see much more talented kart racers than me. I never was a top kart racer. When I went to nationals, I did all right, but I wasn't in the pro class. And I watched those pro guys, and there's different driving styles and there's different kart setups. And something that I noticed was the super fast, smooth guys on like a high speed, mid-radius corner could actually pick up the inside rear wheel on corner entry under braking and reduce the amount of drag. So the kart would turn better. And so the guys that were really fast and smooth would be able to turn in and then tripod up and unload that inside rear wheel so it was easier to turn. This, like you said earlier, the second both wheels are on the ground touching, the thing just wants to go forward. And so I felt like you could watch the fastest guys, the smoothest guys with a dialed in kart that could tripod that thing into corners very, very well. And that was, a combination of tuning it to their style and then knowing, having the driving style that you can have the right chassis tuner come in and set the thing up to where it can turn. So, kart's chassis tuning and car tuning are two totally different worlds. I get totally mixed up when I'm on the kart side of things. I always have to talk to somebody brighter than me whenever I'm driving them to get some setup advice, because it's counterintuitive. Like a general rule of thumb on car stuff is if you want more grip on a respective side, you soften it. You're going to create a more compliant end of the car, where the kart stuff is the opposite. You want to stiffen it. And so it's quite confusing when you get into it. But if you get a really talented driver with somebody who knows how to set the thing up and they can work together, then you get the right combination. But I'm positive you can't give a fast kart guy a bad setup and have him win. And same thing, you can't give, the best chassis to a guy that's not that premier driver to get a winning combination either. So I'd say they go hand in hand.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. All right, we'll move on from the karts here, and we've got a bit of a sense of your background and upbringing. However, it's not everyone who then wakes up one day and says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to actually start a performance workshop, which is Life Motorsport." Again, it's a pretty big leap of faith doing that. So what was the impetus behind that decision? How did that come to be?
Well, I was in Sebring, Florida in 2008, standing in the paddock, and they were unloading the new GT3 RSR. It was the first one to hit the States. It was like air freighted in. It barely made it to the track on time. And the car just blew my mind. And I looked around in the paddock and I thought, you know what? All these people here are making a living, or most of them are here, and this is their job. This is their full-time career. This is what they do. And I decided at that moment that I was going to make a lifetime career out of motorsport. And I managed a race shop shortly after that, continued to do racing. And then a few years later, I was ready to, felt like I had enough business understanding. I knew the mechanical stuff before that, but, I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. And that's part of why it's named Life Motorsport, is because this is nothing else I'd rather be doing. And so it was just taking that mechanical skill that I had and could make a living, added in some small business experience after that. And just going to keep doing it for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think most people in this industry would say that it's a life sentence. So that's probably pretty aptly named. Is it fair to assume, so far we've heard a lot of your background and experience around the Porsche marque? Is that where you got started? Was that a natural progression with Life Motorsport, looking after and building Porsches?
I'm actually a JDM car guy at heart. There's the movie Fast and Furious really, I hate to say it, but it turned me into a car guy. I was, between Gran Turismo and Fast and Furious, I became a JDM car guy. And when I got accepted to Porsche factory training, that was 2004, I'd never touched a single Porsche. They were rad. I thought they were cool cars, way out of my price range, but I didn't honestly know what I was missing. And so once I got introduced to the Porsche brand, and its history deep rooted in motorsport, it really opened my eyes to, what was capable, with where that extra money went. When you look at a 911 turbo that's $120,000 versus an STI that was $32,000 at the time, I'm like, man, the STI is the better value. That's the better car, and once I came out of training, I was like, oh man, they're not even close, but the prices, show that. So, my background is definitely in JDM cars. I'm a factory trained Porsche Master Tech. So that's the brand that I closely aligned with on the racetrack. But, I'd like to think I'm a little bit of both worlds combined. I have a handful of JDM collector cars that I think are cool and will always be cool. But I could either own 5 cool JDM cars or 1 Porsche. So I chose the 5 JDM cars.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that for a lot of enthusiasts, up and coming, the affordability of the JDM options definitely is attractive. And, obviously with the right modifications, we can get performance possibly not too far off the Porsche offerings, albeit you still don't have the benefit of the Porsche badge. So that's an individual choice, but I get that. Bring us up to speed with the development of Life Motorsport. So what sort of a 30,000 foot view of what Life Motorsport is right now, number of staff, and what sort of services are you offering?
So we're based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Current team of 8 full-time people in-house, primarily fabrication and engineering, servicing motorsport. We get some oddball, build requests for different things here and there, but it's all fun, motorsport centric for the most part. type builds. So our typical customer will do a build that's 1 to 2 years ground up for the most case. So we handle all the metal fabrication, engineering, and a lot of the composites development in-house. We'll outsource different pieces. Like we don't do engine builds in-house. I don't do transmission builds in-house. So it's the fabrication, engineering, and then development. We want to take these projects to the track and continue the development of it and race them. We build ski rats for exotic cars. We do odd builds for YouTubers and stuff like that. So we have a very capable staff that are able to take on some special projects. But the bread and butter is fabrication, engineering, and race support.
Now, I think probably the first time that we had the pleasure of bumping into you and having a chat was over in Australia at World Time Attack Challenge. I can't even remember which year, but you had your Life Motorsport R35 GTR there. And since then, we've sort of kind of followed you around the world. I've bumped into you again at Pikes Peak a couple of times, and PRI, and just about any time we're in the States, we seem to be in the same place. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened for a while with the current climate in the world with COVID, but hopefully we get back to some sense of normality. However, where I'm going with this is that R35 GTR time attack car, that's possibly, I guess, at least in my experience, probably what Life Motorsport is maybe most well recognised for. Can you talk to us about the process of choosing a suitable platform if you've got a clean sheet of paper and you decide you want to go and do time attack style racing?
So first step is do not choose an R35. So I would choose an S15. I like the S chassis. I think it's a good fit. It would be the chassis that I would choose, but Life Motorsport services customer builds. So I don't always get to choose what we're building. I can have some influence on it, but the R35, when we first started racing, it was 2013. We had the car together, and it was an overall build that would do time attack stuff. It would do wheel-to-wheel stuff. We did an endurance race with it. It was just a client and good friend of mine, Kyle, brought the car. It was previously owned by Cobb Tuning. It was their time attack car from like 2010. So it was their development car. They retired it, sat around for a couple of years, and then we bought it in 2012, started racing in 2013, and didn't really know what we were doing with it. It was just Kyle was having a good time and wanted to race. So I said, don't ruin your nice street car R35. Let's get you this used race car that's already caged and everything and start there. So we ran it for a couple of years and said, I love time attack. Like I worked in pro racing and that stuff, and it's a drag. It is awful. It's just, here's your rule book. Here's the box. No changes to the car. This is homologated. Just as a car builder, just drove me nuts. So I was like super drawn to time attack before that. So I talked to Kyle and he's like, yeah, let's do time attack stuff. And so to do a time attack build proper, you got to start from the beginning. It has to be a purpose-built time attack car. And so the first step was build the aero. And so we took our previous gen GTR, 3D scanned it, and started working with Andrew Brilliant to design the aero. So the aero would dictate where the chassis would sit, which would dictate where every other piece of the car would go. So we started with the aero design with Andrew. And in 2015, we finished the car in Sydney and competed at the World Time Attack. So it was our first attempt down there and first trip with the purpose-built GTR. So the concept of how do you start a time attack build? Start with the aero. Whatever class you're in, the aero is going to dictate so many other things, especially as you get up the higher ranks to the pro class stuff. So we started with the aero, then we started with the chassis. Everybody knows how to make power with the R35 engines. They're quite good. So it was a lot of chassis, suspension, and brakes to all work with the aero.
One of the obvious, I assume obvious downsides with the R35 platform is that they're pretty tubby. They weigh a lot. So how much of a disadvantage is that? You've mentioned if you had a clean sheet of paper, maybe the S15 would have been a better option, but how much of a downside is that excess weight that you can't get rid of compared to a significantly lighter chassis as a starting point?
It certainly hurts us the worst at World Time Attack because it runs on such a narrow tire from what we're able to run in the States. So like the 295 tire at World Time Attack, that's narrower than a stock tire on an R35. It comes with wider tires from the factory. So we take this extremely heavy car. It's 1,550 kilos. We run it on a 295 square tire. And there's no amount of downforce or horsepower in the world that can overcome that tire differential. And the more downforce and power you throw at it, the quicker you overheat the tires. My first time down there, I was overheating the tires in less than one lap. So the engineers are saying, hey, you can't go so hard on your outlap. I said, I'm only going for a couple corners before you go into turn one. And these guys want me to go into turn one with cold tires, and it's like, shit, that is unbelievably scary. Eastern Creek, Sydney Motorsports Park, whatever you want to call it, turn one is no joke. It's one of the fastest corners on any circuit around the world. So, for me as a driver to go out there, hammer down the front straightaway and turn in flat with, to me, what feels still like cold tires was absolute suicide. But they assured me that they'd come in, and they did. But it was such a disadvantage having all that weight. I couldn't even do a little bit of a warm up. And then sure enough, 3/4 of the way through the lap, you can see that the tire temps were just falling off very, very quickly. So I'd say the biggest disadvantage is definitely shown at World Time Attack level, just with the tire selection. And as we're able to run like a full-size slick in the States, we run a 330 Yokohama slick, and that works really well, and that narrows that performance gap. But the weight you just carry everywhere, acceleration, braking, cornering, even if it's in the right place, you got to carry it everywhere with you. So we can only cut so much out of the car. Nissan did a really good job of getting the weight out. So it's not like we can outsmart Nissan, you can only cut so much crap off while still adding things like aero and wider wheels and bigger brakes and all that necessary stuff to it. So I don't have an exact number on what that weight does to compare to our lap times, but it certainly hurts.
A deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, a bunch of stuff that I want to dive into there, and one of them, because it has been a bone of contention over the last few years with time attack, particularly in Sydney, is that tyre selection, and we've seen some pretty high profile tyre delaminations with a couple of cars. I understand. I'm not trying to knock the rule book here, because I understand the intention is to be correct to the original kind of time attack racing that came out of Japan. But at the same time, we've progressed now. Back in the early days of time attack over in Japan, the cars were probably 450, 550, maybe 600 horsepower, and the kind of aero loads that we're regularly seeing with these developed cars just didn't exist. Have we got to a point where the tyre rules running on essentially what is a dot tyre maybe need to be rethought, moving away from being true to the original concept of time attack to simply keep pace with the technology of these cars and ensure safety?
I've had this conversation in my head so many times, and as the driver of the heaviest pro class car, I would love to have the ability to run a slick. And I said to Ian Baker, the Mr. World Time Attack, I said, hey, if you're way over 1,500 kilos, you should get to run the slick. Let's level the playing field here. And so I've had a lot of interesting discussions around this. And I think what I like about that DOT tire is it's the spec. There's not a lot of rules on time attack that draws people to it. But if we say this is the tire that everybody's on and they all have to build to this standard, and the tire is the limiting factor, whether that's a camber choice, whether that's a horsepower choice, whether it's, hey, I can't do 2 flying laps in a row choice, that is the limit. That's the ceiling that everybody has to go by. And I think the tire is surprisingly good. It's for sure the best DOT that I've ever been on. So I like where that tire is at. Me selfishly would like to run a slick in like a pro class or having a heavy car just to narrow that performance field. But I think if you're going to have one factor that everybody has to build cars around, the tire is the one to do it. Because if one manufacturer of tire, when you start having tire wars amongst the teams, it never ends well. So if you're going to have a spec tire, I've got no problems with that DOT being that tire. Everybody knows the same rules that they have to work around, the same limitations on the tire. So I think it's a good tire for the selection that it is. And so many people have used that as the basis to develop their car around. So I personally wouldn't change it at this point, even understanding the disadvantage I'm at in that class.
I think what you've just said there does make sense. It levels the playing field, and for better or for worse, it becomes the limiting factor for the pro cars. The safety aspect is the bit that I guess plays in the back of my mind, because when we know we're dealing with this limiting factor of the tyre, but we're trying to get another 10th or 2/10 of a second out of that lap, and you're borderline between maybe P1 and P2, and 2/10 is going to take a record, it's very difficult to pull back and go, well, we'll just pull a little bit of downforce out of it to keep the tyre alive, or maybe we'll pull a degree of camber out of it because that's going to give the tyre an easier life. And I think that's the issue, is these engineers and drivers are walking this knife edge of trying to balance car and driver safety with getting the absolute 10/10 out of what that package is capable of. And I mean, that's a difficult choice no matter how we look at it. I don't think there's an answer there, and I'm not trying to play a political game. I don't have a dog in this fight, so we'll move on and see how that progresses as Time Attack continues. Yeah, you've mentioned the importance of aero, and certainly over the time we've been reporting World Time Attack, pre-COVID, we were over there every year. It's a great event, absolutely love it, and it's always great to see a good selection of cars from all around the world. Obviously some exceptional local builds from Australia, and there's some talented builders there, but yeah, cars coming in from Europe, the US and Japan, and that international flavour is just awesome to see. But yeah, even over the time we've been reporting on it, you've seen the exponential improvement in the aero packages on these cars. And I think from a layman's perspective, it could be a little difficult to really understand just how vital to the lap time the aero is. And I just wonder if you can maybe give us some concepts around what that does, because obviously if we're talking about the levers we have available to pull in terms of improving lap performance, we've got power, but there's a limit on that. We end up in wheel spin. We've got grip, and we've already talked a little bit about where the limiting factors there come in. We've got car setup, obviously, but we've got some pretty skilled engineers setting these cars up anyway. So getting that right is a sort of a given. And then we've got this downforce. So yeah, I think you've already alluded to the fact that in your opinion, the downforce sort of trumps all other.
100%. Aero is amazing. We did our own homebrew aero. You know, we put the splitter on, canards, all the bolt-on junk that you can put on a car and expect some results with, and didn't have much success. It was okay, yeah, like we did something, but when you get to professional level aero and big aero, there's no substitution. There's nothing that I've ever driven remotely close to the levels of downforce. I guess the highest downforce car I'd driven previous to building our GTR was a Formula Atlantic car. Big tunnels, big wings front and rear, big tires, big mechanical grip, and very good aero as well. Even that car was no comparison to the GTR Pro level aero that I got to experience. With all that downforce comes drag, of course. You know, it's a trade-off, but we always found ourselves going faster by adding more downforce. It's not like we're like, oh, hey, we need to trim out and get a little bit more. It's just put more wing in it, and then crank the boost up as conditions are right. So aero, hands down, the best thing we did to the car, the biggest difference over the previous generation GTR. Power for power, we were about 4 seconds a lap quicker between the two cars, strictly with aero. And so it's a gift that keeps on giving. It doesn't need to be rebuilt like an engine that fatigues out and times out. As long as you don't go off course, the aero is still there, and it's gives you that love every single lap. So the aero wars have been fantastic to watch. It's been so fun to see the development of these cars, and especially at World Time Attack. There's no better platform where you get to see each package, each individual car come out. Whether it's MCA or the RP car or Suzuki, like every time those cars hit the track, it doesn't go well. They'll go bobbing down the straightaway, or they have crap flying off, or the thing will just be dialed. And it's just amazing to see each team develop this stuff, and how they get it sorted and how that relates to lap time. So it's been my favorite part about Time Attack. Sure, it looks cool, but to use the aero as a tuning tool, I get a lot more satisfaction as a driver out of that than just saying, hey, give me some more boost, let's turn up the power.
To sort of, can we put some numbers around, can you share numbers with us around sort of what levels of downforce your kit from Andrew Brilliant's actually producing?
They're all made up numbers anyway, so let's say 3 tons.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I that's probably fair. I've always found it amusing when people want to maybe not share downforce numbers when they genuinely actually know them, as if sharing that number in an interview is going to mysteriously let someone develop a kit that's going to then compete. Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm definitely as far away from an aerodynamicist as you could possibly get, but I do see that that's kind of one of those junctions of science and art, and then there's the validation element that comes on top of that. Now, obviously, a lot of our listeners are going to have absolutely no idea of Eastern Creek Sydney Motorsport Park, and with this format being audio, it's difficult to really sort of explain what the aero is capable of, but just to give some real broad understanding there. I mean, Sydney Motorsport Park, currently the World Time Attack lap record, I think it's 1:21 or thereabouts from the RP968 Porsche, and that's second only, I think, to an A1 GP car driven by Nico Hulkenberg, and only by a second or so, if memory serves correct. I'll probably get corrected quite quickly. However, what I wanted to get at there is, we're talking about an open wheel A1 GP race car, comparing that to a tin top race car sedan, and most of the professional motorsport that runs at Eastern Creek, down that long front straight, getting speeds of 250, 270 kilometers an hour, and into turn one, which is still a fast corner, but the car's, conventional, maybe a GT3 race car, for an example, they're still braking pretty hard going into turn one, whereas the fastest of these pro cars at World Time Attack, turn one's not a turn, that's just a kink, it's taken flat, which I can only imagine takes a sizable set of balls, particularly as you mentioned when you're turning it on cold tires and just hoping they'll come good.
Yeah, there's nothing like that turn one at Eastern Creek. For us it's 160 miles an hour. You guys can convert it, but extremely fast. And it's at low boost, it's flat. But as you turn the boost up, you need to breathe through the middle of the corner. And on the topic of aero in turn one there, it's one of the fastest corners I've ever gone through, definitely the fastest corner I've ever gone through flat. And a few years ago, we were back with the GTR, and there was big wind, big winds during the shootout portion. And so big headwind as you're going down into turn one. So the car feels really good as you turn in, and maybe a little bit slower. But as you turn sideways and the direction of the wind is blowing sideways and over the top of the car, you lose so much downforce so quickly. And I had no idea that I would lose that much downforce with the wind blowing sideways. And I had one of the scariest moments I've ever had at that track. I was perfectly set up, turn in felt great, apex was great, and I go to straighten up the wheel, and the car just shifts to the right 4-5 feet, and I was out on the rumble strips before I knew it. And that's just one of those high aero, high downforce things that you never think about until you're in the car saying, hey, why did the car just shift to the side so abruptly and so quickly? And it was because you're so dependent on the direction of the wind. And so it's just one more factor of the high downforce stuff that's just comes into play. The braking capacity is through the roof phenomenal. It's so high. You can brake so deep in the corners, and you can achieve braking pressures that are so high that you normally never touch with just a regular downforce level.
Yeah, I think that's something anyone who's watched F1 will have heard the commentators talk about, the wind, the direction of the wind and how that affects the cars. And as a casual observer, you might be thinking, well, really? Is it going to be that sensitive? But when you're talking about such a developed package, the wind, particularly if the wind speed is high, it's obviously going to have to play into the end results. And I can only imagine as a driver, particularly if the wind changes while you're out on the track and you may not be completely aware of that, adjusting your driving, your line, your speed, your braking points, etc. to suit, it's going to be challenging at best. I just wanted to also, I don't know if this is an old wives' tale, it's something I remember reading or hearing from the old F1 days where they ran the full underbody tunnels and basically ground effect. And those underbody tunnels, which I think in a way they're bringing back for 2022, will be interesting to see how that works. Those were incredibly effective, but also very sensitive to yaw angle. And from what I understood, one of the reasons why they banned them back in the day was they produced a massive amount of downforce as long as the car was not really running at a significant yaw angle. And if the car stepped out, for example, basically the airflow through the tunnels essentially stalled, and all of a sudden you went from a huge amount of downforce to next to nothing, and the car would just fall off the track. Like I say, I don't know if that's an old wives' tale. I think some of that makes sense to me, and it sounds damn scary. What I wanted to move on to with the aero side of things, from a driver's perspective, if you've come from something that is essentially a production car with little to no downforce, how much of a learning curve is it for you to learn what the new capabilities of the car are in terms of braking performance, cornering performance, building up to that limit without overstepping it? And of course, because the downforce from the aero increases the faster you go, the capabilities of the car in a high-speed corner, 250, 270 kilometers an hour versus a low-speed hairpin are going to be dramatically different. So how do you go about finding those limits without massively overstepping them?
The easiest way to go about it is, well, I'll start by saying the hardest part about learning a high downforce car is the braking potential. That is by far the hardest thing. When it comes to accelerating out of a corner, the downforce ramps in. You start at a lower speed and it ramps in and you're like, oh, okay, it feels better. Static cornering, it's pretty easy to feel where the limit is. And so that you're kind of, when you're cornering, you're doing as a driver what you'd normally be doing, and the levels have just moved up. But where it gets strange is when you go into brake application and then the brake pedal release. So let's say you double, triple the downforce of your car, your braking point moves significantly deeper. And so you mentally have to say, I know that the braking potential is there and I have to take it further. I need to go deeper, or, I'm normally hitting the brakes here and I have to pull off the brakes and roll into the corner because I shed too much speed on entry. So the other thing that happens with the downforce is as it bleeds off very quickly. So if you're at 200K, your braking potential is going to be up real high. And as you get down to 100K, you've lost maybe 80% of that braking potential that's aided with downforce. And so the rate at which you pull off of the brake pedal, that you go from maybe 2,000 psi of brake pressure and bleed it off, the timing of that is all screwed up because it's dependent now on the aero, which can effectively make more powerful force than just the traction of the tires alone. So you can double, triple the amount of braking potential with that aero that you normally wouldn't have. So that's the most difficult part with learning the aero stuff. Is it's one thing to drive a little bit deeper and find that braking zone, but the rate at which you peel off the brake pedal, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper, but the time that you go too deep, the thing will lock up. So as that downforce bleeds off and you haven't quite pulled out of the brake pedal enough, your brake pressures are still high, the downforce bleeds off, your pressure is still the same, and now you've induced lockup because you don't have that downforce there anymore. And so you go deeper, deeper, deeper on the brakes until you get to a lockup. And then, as the downforce ramps off, you may be sliding off the course. So finding that point on a high downforce car is by far the most difficult thing to do.
And I think particularly with a lot of fragile underbody aero stuff, sliding off the course is probably the last thing you want to do if you want to keep your splitter and diffuser in one piece. All right, Cole, we'll move on from the time attack car, but before we started recording, you mentioned something that sounded pretty unique that I just wanted to get some insight in, which is a new project you're involved with for Pikes Peak, still on the R35 platform, but with just a slight twist, I guess. What do you got planned? What's going on?
Oh, man, we're weird. So I'm just at the mercy of anybody who wants to build a car here at Life Motorsports. So I just want to drive anything and everything. So we had this R35 chassis that we retired in 2015 when we built the new car, which we named Sydney. The old car was named Frank the Tank because it was just such a heavy, just tough, overbuilt GTR. So when we retired that car, the shell just sat around for years and years. And we started doing a Ford Power Stroke diesel project for a customer of ours. And the project went really well and it started to wrap up. And we started kicking around the idea of putting a GTR engine, a diesel Power Stroke engine into the GTR chassis to go compete at Pikes Peak and chase the diesel record. So the diesel record is held by a guy named Scott Birdsall, and he's got a cool truck. It's like it's an old 50s looking truck body on a more modern chassis with 1,000 horsepower and a straight six Cummins diesel engine in it. And he went pretty quick, and we looked at that time and said, "Hey, I think that we could get close to that time." I pitched the idea to him. He owns a diesel performance company. And so I said, "We've got this chassis. I'll give you the chassis, but I want to drive the thing at Pikes Peak. I want to go chase after this diesel record." And he gave us the green light to do the project. And so, we're putting a 6-liter Ford Power Stroke engine into the R35 chassis. We'll run in a rear-wheel drive configuration. It'll have all the World Time Attack aero, big splitter, triple element rear wing, all that good stuff on it as well, on a chassis I'm really familiar with. So when it comes to suspension setup, brakes, all that good stuff, we've got a jump start on it. I know how it's going to respond. And weight-wise, we were able to push the engine back pretty far into the chassis and ditch the all-wheel drive, so that helps keep some of the weight off the nose of the car. So we hope it weighs somewhat close to what we hope it goes under 4,000 pounds, which is just a massive pig. I don't know what it is in kilos. It's a disgusting amount, but
a lot.
Yeah, it's too much for a race car, but we think if we have enough horsepower and good aero that we'll have a pretty good shot at the Pikes Peak record. So that's the purpose of doing the diesel R35 is go chase that record.
Now, just for anyone who's interested in Scott Birdsall's old Smoky, who holds the current record, search out our YouTube channel because we actually did do a tech tour of that truck. It's a cool truck. There's no questions asked there. However, I imagine a developed R35 would probably have a chassis advantage and an aero advantage, absolutely no doubt. Obviously, common rail diesel engines, particularly when you've got 6 litres to play with, it's not too difficult to make power, particularly if you're looking at compound turbocharging. You've got a number in mind of what you're expecting this thing to punch out?
Yeah, we're shooting for 750 horsepower, 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, and we're not going crazy on the power. We could definitely make more and get more complicated with it, but we originally looked at doing all-wheel drive. And then we looked at doing rear-wheel drive with a 6-speed sequential. And all of those things, there was a lot of unknowns and a lot more complexities associated with it. So we said we were going to take the transmission that we know works. I've run the R35s in a rear-wheel drive configuration multiple times. They can work really well. So I didn't worry about any major setup changes. So we're running just the 4-speed automatic with a Winters quick change rear end. So that'll give us quick change gear ratio and hopefully enough of adjustability to make a 4-speed automatic work. It's full manual valve body, so it'll shift on demand as we need it to. But it's not the ideal setup for us drivetrain wise, but we think we'll make up enough on the chassis, aero, and the brakes to outdo Scott. Scott's got a whole new build that he's coming out with. There's also another guy that's putting a Volkswagen diesel into a Radical chassis. So we got 2 sports racer type diesel cars running, and then Old Smoky this year is being driven by Aaron Kaufman, which was my teammate and stuff at Pikes Peak in years past. So we've got this fun diesel rivalry battle thing going on. We all have different formulas. 2 of the guys are lightweight cars. The other 2 guys are heavyweight cars with truck engines. So it's going to be really interesting on a race day who's got the fastest diesel, and it's just going to be fun just racing with our buds.
Yeah, I think people lose track of the fact that while there's a rivalry there and everyone wants to be fastest, it's always more fun when you do have some competition because everyone pushes everyone else. And generally within reason at these sorts of events, particularly what I've seen at Pikes Peak, most people are friendly as well. It's a real camaraderie that we see at an event like Pikes Peak. Now, one of the challenges with Pikes Peak is the altitude, obviously, and that plays into the amount of power an engine can produce. We've just got less air density, so there's less oxygen for a given volume of air being forced into the engine. So you mentioned 750 horsepower. Is that the sort of power level you're expecting to be running at the hill climb, or is that a sea level sort of power level and you'll be down from that?
That's going to be Colorado Springs level. So the valley, roughly 5,000 feet of base elevation is where we want to hit that number. So we expect that to taper as we get closer to the summit. But I've learned from my years of running at Pikes Peak that throttle response is much more important than peak power. There's so many transitional throttle points where you just need the power there on tap. And so if I could choose between 600 horsepower that's very sharp or 1,000 horsepower that's maybe a little lethargic, I'll choose the 600 all day. And so that's my reasoning on choosing a little bit lower power level. The idea is to go with a single turbo with VTG. So we have a little bit of a advantage there, just trying to keep the thing spooled up and within a good power band. Because again, with this 4-speed transmission, we have to get pretty unique on how we're going to spread those gears out and have somewhat of a top speed, but also not fall out of boost on a lot of the lower speed hairpin corners that Pikes Peak has.
Yeah, I think for those who haven't visited Pikes Peak, it is quite a challenging track, course, hill climb because it's so variable. You've got some very, very high speed sections, but particularly that center section of the hill, the W's, where you've got just switchback hairpin after switchback hairpin, and getting that power delivery, throttle response out of those low speed hairpins really is going to make a big difference. I'm interested in the choice of the transmission though. Why a 4-speed auto over something more conventional motorsport orientated like a 6-speed paddle shift or sequential?
Reliability.
Okay.
Just the fact that, it's something that we can change and improve later. But this, as you know, at Pikes Peak, you get one shot on race day. And so we thought reliability, we needed an engine and transmission combo that was going to do the same thing for us every single time. And if we run good and want to put a 6-speed sequential in it in the future, we can go back and do that if that's the factor. But I just want reliability, and I don't want to be messing with transmissions and engineering a new gearbox. to work with this motor. So it was just one of the simplest things to do, and I need responsiveness and reliability to give me the best shot for our team to take that diesel record on race day.
I remember from my own drag racing days, it was always a sense of frustration while we were pulling out a transmission and covered in gear oil, while you watch the cars running the dirty old power glides just go and do laps. But can't argue with a well set up. Obviously, there's still levels to this stuff, but a well developed and set up auto it's definitely got some advantages in going for it. All right, so let's move on. And the other topic that I wanted to cover, and this is quite a different aspect to life motorsport, something that I saw back when I was over at Pikes Peak. I think you were still relatively new at the time, which is your other enterprise, which is Sierra Cars. Can you give us again a 30,000 foot view of what Sierra Cars is and what you're trying to build here?
So I'd love to share the Sierra Cars story with you, because it's to connect with me as a younger broke kid trying to get into motorsport. So Sierra Cars is a simple, lightweight, single-seat race car that can be used on desert, rallycross, asphalt hill climbs like Pikes Peak. It's one lightweight, great power-to-weight ratio that can be run on a number of different surfaces that's also affordable to operate. So when I was a mechanic coming up, I didn't have much money to do any of this racing stuff with it. So, but I wanted to do rally, I wanted to do hill climb, I wanted to do asphalt track days, and there was no car that did all of those things. And I drove a European cross cart, and it was built in Spain. It was a great car. It had a lot of fun driving it, but it was really limited on some of the things that it could do. So for some of the listeners that don't know what a cross cart is, it's a tube chassis, motorcycle engine powered, rear wheel drive, like rally car. And so I drove that, and it was good, but it wasn't great. And I thought, why aren't people in the States building something like this? Because man, I'd love to run something like this at Pikes Peak. I'd love to go out in the desert and play with my friends with something like this. Run it where these UTVs run it in the deserts that are in my area. So I just said, we'll build it ourselves. And I didn't realize what I was really getting into. And that was back in 2017. After a few years of building prototypes and selling cars and doing that whole deal, in 2021, we moved to our production level chassis. And now we build about 10 cars per year, take orders on them, and they're primarily Suzuki Hayabusa engine powered. So 1300 cc, 6-speed sequential, cars that are, multi-purpose, multi-use, that are affordable to use. So because I was so fortunate enough to drive some of the highest end race cars in the world, the latest and greatest GT3 cars, Formula Atlantics, like these crazy time attack cars, man, I got addicted to that. That's just the feeling of driving these nice cars. There's nothing else like it. And so Sierra was my way of giving somebody that same high-level driving experience that they can actually afford to operate. My friends cannot afford to even rent 3 laps in a GT3. That's just the reality of it. It's such a money-consuming thing. But I know that I can provide them the same level of driving experience and excitement and fun in a Sierra. And so that's what I set out to do, is create the best driving experience that money can buy and be able to share it with my friends and family and people who, like what we're doing. So we do build 10 cars a year for people who want custom built cars, and they are not cheap. They're hand built, and each car is made to order. But they're very cost effective to operate, especially when you look at the price points or lap times of what they do compared to price points. So like our Sierra RX3, which is our most common model, that's the naturally aspirated Suzuki Hayabusa engine. On an asphalt road course, that is going to turn new Porsche GT3 lap times on an asphalt road course. That same car, you can put a gravel tire on and go do a gravel hill climb. And you can't, do that, or you could. Most people don't take their Porsche to the gravel hill climb after. So in doing this lightweight, compact, simple package with our cars, we're able to get these high level of driving experience, these high level of lap times, but keep the operational costs really low. And to this day, I've put over the exact number is 508 different drivers into Sierra cars now, and to share that driving experience. Because I don't need people to buy the Sierra. It's more for me about sharing the driving experience that I think people should be having. I want other people to feel what I feel. I'm so fortunate to drive all these cool high-end race cars at all these amazing tracks and facilities that it's not fair. Other people should feel that. I want to share that with people, and it never gets old sharing that experience. When somebody gets out of a Sierra for the first time, just the smile on their face, the excitement, half the time they're just shaking. And I know at that moment they're getting to feel what I feel. And, if they roll it or whatever or break it, it's not that big of a deal versus if you throw your McLaren into the rocks or a GT3, it's huge expenses. So it's kind of my way to connect with the average user. I do driving experiences that are, a few $100 up to private test days that get into thousands of dollars. But the driving experience was super key to me. And because of that, I've been able to share it with a lot of really cool people.
All right. Again, a bunch of stuff to dig into, but I just wanted to focus on something that's so easy to overlook. I mean, a lot of people who haven't spent much time racing cars, on face value, you sort of think that the purchase price of the car is your big ticket item. And yeah, sure, that's going to cost you a bunch, particularly if you're looking at a current crop GT3 race car. However, it's what you do need to keep in mind, which is so easy to overlook, is the actual cost of running the car. These GT3 cars have a life on all of the components, and after 5,000 racing kilometers, you've got to replace basically all of the running gear. The engine may need a rebuild. It's going to add up. And I mean, I don't run these cars. I've heard numbers thrown around for the likes of an older now McLaren 650S. I think we heard numbers of something like $100 or $150 per racing kilometer. I have no idea how accurate that is, but I mean, that's everything, that the rebuild, lifing on parts, tires, consumables, fuel. And if you take that into account, our local racetracks are a touch over 4 kilometers. Just one lap, that's a bunch of expense. If you want to go endurance racing, well, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out it's going to be pretty pricey. So, getting rid of the weight, and then because you've got rid of the weight, you don't really need so much power. That's where the maintenance costs and the running costs come down. Am I reading that right?
Yep, absolutely. Because you're not carrying around all that excess weight. When you take a passenger vehicle that's made to meet crash test safety standards, it needs to hold, a bunch of groceries in the booth. There's all this excess stuff that manufacturers put in the cars to, meet their requirements. And none of that necessarily improves the driving experience. In fact, it detracts from it. And now you need to add more horsepower and more weight to support that horsepower, to level that playing field again. So, having a lightweight compact engine like the Suzuki Hayabusa, and the way we constructed our chassis and suspension all gave us a way to keep costs low on operation. And I'd like to think that there's nothing at our lap time that goes, there's nothing as fast as us that can operate at a similar cost. It's just not even close. And that's because of the construction of the vehicle. It's meant to be worked on. It's overbuilt in a lot of ways. It's very durable parts. So we went up on tube size on the chassis, rod ends on different suspension components. We went larger than we needed to make these components last longer. So we maybe increased the weight of the car 10, 15%, but we essentially doubled the lifing program for a lot of the components on the car. So it was all built with cost of operation in mind, because they're all bespoke, handmade cars. Yeah, the cost of us building the car is expensive, but the cost of operation, like you said, is the most overlooked thing in motorsport. Is much, much lower, and they're simple to work on. You don't need to have special tools to do anything. Either we sell the parts or the Suzuki dealer sells the parts. or comes from one of our like 4 reputable manufacturers that we source parts from. So it's meant to be easy and cost effective for the end user.
When you're starting a project like this and you can pretty much select anything to power it, obviously the Hayabusa engine is well proven, and it's been a choice for a number of manufacturers, the likes of Radical, etc. Is the track record of the Hayabusa the reason that you went down that path?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, there's 2 things in motorsport that you cannot fake. You cannot fake engines, and you cannot fake tires. You could put lipstick on a pig and make something look good, but you cannot fake engines or tires. And so the 2 key ingredients that I started with was the Hayabusa engine. It was proven for 2 decades. They were proven to work well under boost. And there was they were completely developed. I knew that was the engine to use. The other thing is a 13-inch tire. When it comes to asphalt performance, every good formula car that's been developed for the past 60 years has run a 13-inch slick. So when it came to performance, I'm not going to go out and develop a tire. So I chose a 13-inch wheel tire package and the Hayabusa engine. Those are the 2 pieces of the framework that we started with that you cannot duplicate anywhere else. You can bend tubes a lot away and sheet metal and stuff like that, but a good engine transmission package and tires you cannot fake. So those are the key components around the Sierra.
Now, one of the advantages with using a motorcycle-based engine like the Hayabusa, and we've seen these swapped into all manner of cars, Toyota Starlets, MX-5s, etc. The list goes on, as well as the likes of the Radicals that we've already talked about. And the nice thing is you're getting an out-of-the-box sequential transmission, which is great. The downside, of course, is that it's not too often that you're going to put your motorbike in reverse. So they don't have a reverse gear, and that doesn't work that well for us in a car application. So how have you got around that, or if you have got around that?
Yes, we have. There's kind of a funny story internally. Well, it's not that funny. I guess it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. We went to Pikes Peak. Man, it was our second year. I think it was 2019, and we got busted on qualifying day because the rule book says you need to have reverse. And we did not have reverse, and so they came and stripped our stickers off the car and said back of the pack because we didn't have reverse. And I read the rules a little bit different than they did, but that's the penalty that they handed out. They allowed us to run on race day, but not for open wheel points or not for an open wheel record. So we came back from that event, and I had tried to source a gearbox through Quaife, similar to what Radical uses. And Quaife dropped the ball big time. I'll just say I had a really, really poor experience with them at delivery times. That's why we didn't have the gearboxes in for Pikes Peak. A week after that, a friend of mine called and said, he worked at SEDEV and in the States here, and he said, "Hey Cole, I heard about your drama at Pikes Peak. We've got a product we've been working on that we think will work really well for you guys, and that's a system they call gear transfer system. So it runs off the regular sprocket where you would run a chain. It goes into an all gear drive system that has a drop gear for reverse. It has a real adjustable limited slip differential. Has internal gear pump and oil cooler. It has an external drive for an alternator. It had everything that we kind of wanted and needed for our next generation of cars. So all the cars since then run this SEDEV gearbox, all the Hayabusa powered cars. And it's been a game changer for us because it does all of those things. So asphalt performance got better, tunability got better, cooling got better, reliability got better because we could ditch the chain. So it's small weight penalty to go to that stuff, but it gave us, all the ingredients we needed to kind of nip some of the cheap things off the car. I never liked the chain drive. It worked and it was simple enough, but it was the most maintenance intensive part of the car. But when you're trying to put Hayabusa power levels through a lot of grip, the chain just gets fatigued really, really quickly. And so, the right solution was to go to that gear transfer system. And we haven't looked back. It's been a fantastic system. It's worked really, really well for us. And we're happy to be partnered up with those guys.
Okay. Now, I'm guessing there might have been a bit of a change here just based on what you've said, but maybe this is where our conversation goes full circle. And we talked about in the karting days where you essentially have no differential in the rear. Am I right in assuming that pre-Sativ you were running a locked rear end, a spool essentially with no differential, but now you mentioned a proper limited slip differential in the Sativ, so that I've got that right. That's changed in the development. And if so, how much of a game changer has a proper limited slip differential been in the performance of the car and its handling?
It's been huge, primarily on the asphalt. On the dirt, it's not too far off speed-wise. So that's the only place that we didn't see like a great big gain, but on asphalt performance, drivability, tunability, it's just significantly better. What ended up happening is when we were running the spool, we were doing weird things to the suspension to get the handling right. And so we were like, this doesn't make sense, but the car is working better. So we're gonna make these changes, and we'd go to extremes, whether it was a caster angle or Ackerman. We were doing odd things to get the thing to turn mid corner. We'd had a mid corner push, which is inherent of the spool. You can only tune so much of that out. So once we were able to get rid of that, we were able to rethink the whole front suspension and make huge improvements to it without sacrificing anything anywhere else. So it was a game changer for the entire car, because on the Sierras, we're on our 8th front suspension iteration, and everything's changed over time. And the big change that we made was to go from a spool car to a limited slip car, and still have good suspension travel, good steering angle, good characteristics all around. But we didn't have to kind of do Band-Aid handling changes around the spool. So definitely improved the entire package of the car, being able to go to a limited slip there in the back.
In terms of the suspension in general, are you using any CAD software for the design of that? Any packages to sort of run through the kinematics of the suspension? And what's the process there? Maybe earlier days with the prototyping, what's the sort of process that Sierra went through with validation of changes to fundamental suspension geometry?
Well, we've done both the CAD and the just cardboard cutouts. It was like amazing so we'd model it on CAD, but we didn't have the suspension kinematic program. So we model it on CAD, basically make a cardboard representation of it. We put it on our fixture table. So we have this table with laser cut holes on it. So they're very, very accurate in placement. And the guys in the shop modeled our suspension, and then they were able to run it through the suspension motion ratios and measure the kinematics of it. So we've done a combination of both CAD design and, cardboard templates to figure out what we wanted and needed. Over time, we added more suspension travel to the car, and we dialed certain things out like Ackerman and caster out of it, some of the things that we were chasing for around spool handling. It's been a combination of both of those. But one of the most surprising things about it is theoretical changes don't always translate like you think. I'll read a book about how a suspension change in theory should affect the car. Well, that car was from the 90s, and it was front engine, and it had an open diff, or it didn't line up. So what actually was put out in theory versus reality were two different things. And it's been great because I can hop in these cars and go out and test drive it like same day. So we'd make a change and go out and drive it and be like, oh, it's garbage. That was a bad move. We went backwards, and we'd go back and change it and go the opposite way. And so it was more seat of the pants testing, competition testing, having two cars with two different suspension setups. I could hop between and say, this is what I like about this car, and this is what I like about this car. Let's get these two things to work together. Through just a lot of research and development, I'd say it's the most heavily developed part on the car is the front suspension and steering, and how that all works together. More iterations than anything that we've done on the car, for sure.
Sure. Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for cardboard aided design. We don't need to be deep in Fusion 360 or SolidWorks to actually design parts and build them. But as you sort of pointed out there, the ability to validate in the real world and back-to-back test, great if you've got two cars with different setups. I mean, you can really straight away see the subtle differences between them. That's got to be a really powerful aspect of your development program. All right, Cole, I think we'll move towards wrapping this up before we go too long here and too deep in. I could probably speak for another hour on Sierra cars in itself, but we will let you get out of here sooner rather than later. At the end of this, we sort of have the same questions that we like to ask all of our guests, so we'll chuck those at you now. And the first of those is what's next for you, Life Motorsport and Sierra cars in the future? Obviously, we've already heard about the upcoming Pikes Peak project, but what's on the radar?
I'm just going to try to stay behind the driver's seat as much as possible. Running the business is really, really hard. And when I'm in a race car, that's really, really easy. So I'm really looking forward to Pikes Peak this year. It's 100th running. It's, my favorite event. So that's a big deal for me this year. I've got a number of gravel hill climbs lined up. We'll probably head back to South Africa. I did some racing down there, an endurance race and hill climb last year. So probably head back down there again. I want to get back to Australia and go play at World Time Attack. We'll see if I can line up a seat there. And we've got a couple cool builds that we're doing here at Life Motorsports that we're covering that stuff on Instagram and YouTube. And we've got a Pro Drive build, ex-Pro Drive Subaru car that we're building for Pikes Peak this year, as well as the diesel GTR. And then on the Sierra cars side of things, we're moving towards electric development. So we'll have an electric powertrain by the end of the year in that. And we're also looking at two-seater Sierra cars. So that's kind of the future of the Sierra stuff. And I'm just aiming to get as many people in those cars and share that experience and just build the next one and build the next one and keep going from there.
Well, if you ever want to get a demo one into Queenstown in New Zealand, I'll put my hand up to look after one for you.
There's that Jack's Ridge, driveway hill climb, whatever you want to call it. And I think we're going to try to get a car down to them. So that might be your best shot.
Sounds good. Might be a little bit above my pay grade, but be exciting to see one over this side of the world. All right. Looking at your career so far, you've had your finger in a lot of pies and you've done a lot of things. It's been pretty wide and varied from what we've talked about today. But if you could go back in time and give any advice from what you've learned to a younger version of yourself, what would that be?
Oh man, I made a lot of mistakes. I'd say, like a younger me, find mentors, find people, stand on the shoulders of giants. There's people that have been out there doing it for a really long time. And if you can make yourself a good student to learn from somebody, then you're gonna rapidly accelerate your knowledge base and your skills and figure out what you do and don't want to do. There's no sense in like honing in on a skill, whether it's welding or machining or, whatever this skill is. Don't corner yourself to one thing. Work with people that are doing the things that you think you want to be doing. If you want to be tuning, ECUs, or if you want to be a machinist or build carbon fiber, go talk to those people that are doing it. Most people are willing to share their knowledge and experience with you. And I have a lot of mentors and friends and people that I look up to and work within the industry that I reach out to with all of these questions. There's no shame in not knowing this stuff. And a simple Instagram message or what have you can really change your life and change your perspective on what sort of careers in motorsport are available. I didn't have anybody in the beginning to really reach out to. I was relying on a few local mechanics to help guide me. And now I've got a whole list of people that I can reach out to and lean on for their knowledge and their recommendations and their advice. And those people are out there. There's no shame in asking for help and reaching out to people that have done it before you and kind of paved the way.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I could not agree more. I think a lot of people particularly when they're initially getting into the automotive industry, think that they have to do it all or are too proud to ask advice. And I mean, the reality is, there's nothing really new in this industry. So if you can learn from others who've got the runs on the board and been there and done that, that's only going to fast track your own learning, and hopefully along with that, it's going to help you avoid some of the common pitfalls that are going to waste your time and your money and maybe damage an expensive engine along the way. So yeah, great advice. Couldn't agree more. Last question for today, Cole. If people want to follow you and find out what you're up to, where can they do that? Where can they reach out?
I'm on social media, on Instagram and Facebook as Cole the Racer. The shop, you can follow Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Life Motorsport. We've got a channel there, as well as Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for the Sierra cars as well. And that's just Sierra-cars. So we do a pretty good job of uploading our content, covering all the events. We've had a full-time media guy for years. So it's quality content. It tells an honest story about our trials and tribulations as we go to different races and prepare for different events. So it's entertaining to me. I'm having a good time, and we put it out there for the world to see. And we don't really sugarcoat it. There's not a lot of fake funk in there. It's just the realities of motorsport, and you kind of being a grassroots guy with some cool builds, and I get to be a part of is kind of a unique perspective on motorsport in general.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos and content. Your social media guys are one of the best in the industry. So yeah, it's interesting to watch for sure. And we'll put some links to all of those in the show notes for this episode. Look, Colt, we'll let you get out of here. Really appreciate your time coming on and talking to us today. And particularly, I can't wait to hear how the diesel GTR goes at Pikes Peak. We wish you all the best with that and the future development of Sierra cars. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, man. Cheers.
All right, that concludes our interview. And before we sign off, I just wanted to mention, for anyone who's been perhaps hiding under a rock and hasn't heard of High Performance Academy before, we are an online training school, and we specialize in teaching a range of performance automotive topics, everything from engine tuning and engine building through to wiring, car suspension and wheel alignment, data analysis, and race driver education. Now, remember, you've got that coupon code. You can use podcast75 at the checkout to get $75 off the purchase of your first course. You'll find our full course list at hpacademy.com/courses. Important to mention that when you purchase a course from us, that course is yours for life as well. It never expires. You can rewatch the course as many times as you like, whenever you like. The purchase of a course will also give you 3 months of access to our gold membership. That gives you access to our private members only forum, which is the perfect place to get answers to your specific questions. You'll also get access to our regular weekly members webinars, which is where we touch on a particular topic in the performance automotive realm. We dive into that topic for about an hour. If you can watch live, you can ask questions and get answers in real time. If the time zones don't work for you, that's fine too. You're going to get access as a gold member to our previous webinar archive. We've got close to 300 hours of existing content in that archive. It is an absolute goldmine. So remember that coupon code podcast75. Check out our course list at hpacademy.com/courses.